super glad you all are here, even more so as I am seeing all of these faces in the auditorium, a lot of youth, which makes my heart very, very, very happy. Welcome to the Youth Service Provider Network YSPN kickoff event. We are going to be talking today about youth suicide prevention. So let's get down to it. Let's start the conversation. So I want to introduce the amazing people that are seated before you. They are four of lots of amazing people in our larger Tri-County community. But let me introduce each of them, and then we'll start with Donna, who will start us off. So Donna Noonan is the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division's Suicide Prevention Coordinator. Amy Baker is the former Washington County Suicide Prevention Coordinator and currently the School-Based Services Coordinator with Washington County. Cody Welty, who is just near and dear to my heart, is one of the many voices of Clackamas County youth, and we're really pleased to have him here today. Susie Shank, last but not least, is the lead crisis clinician at the Urgent Walk-In Clinic Centerstone, located on 82nd Avenue, open 7 days a week. And also a mental health first aid trainer, has been training for years and years and years, was helpful in bringing mental health first aid to Clackamas County, has trained over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. So Donna is going to start us off by offering us some details about the impact of youth suicide on a state level. So what happens in Oregon? What do the numbers look like in Oregon? And what's the impact of youth suicide here in our local county, in Clackamas County? How might our county differ from other counties around us, the Tri-County area? And most importantly, what's happening on the prevention front to address this very important topic? So Donna, thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gallie. You've got an amazing crowd here today, and I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you. The message that I first want to convey is a message of hope. A little closer, okay. That suicide is preventable. Suicide is preventable when we know what to look for. In fact, how many in the audience know CPR? Almost everybody. How many of you know how to recognize signs of suicide and know how to ask the question? Oh, yay. This is a trained audience. Usually the second question gets very, very small response and everybody knows CPR. How many of you are trained in assist, QPR, safe, no, I just forgot the name of it. A QPR, assist, AMSR, mental health first aid. How many of you have been trained in that? Wonderful. It's my belief that it should be universal, that everyone in our population should be trained to recognize signs when someone might be thinking about suicide through their talk, through their behaviors, through their actions, that we be able to recognize it as universally as people are trained in CPR. The more likely a person is to be recognized and the more likely we are to approach them and know what to do, the more likely we are to prevent suicide, and that's how it's preventable. We need to be able to know how to talk to that person, how to ask the question, are you thinking about suicide, or something equally as pointed, as strong as that, not a layered question, but a very pointed question. Know where to get help, and have trained people in place to be able to help. We need to have trained mental health practitioners. We need primary care clinicians, emergency department staff, crisis response. We need follow-up, and we need training in reducing access to lethal means, especially for persons who are experiencing suicidal crises. What I'm saying is that we need to have systems in place, whole systems, from recognition to help to follow-up and to connectedness. For people to be connected throughout whatever systems they belong to in our larger communities. Some people only need to talk to someone when they're in a suicidal crisis. Suicide is pretty stigmatized, and if someone's thinking about suicide, they often will keep it to themselves and not let anyone know except through signs, behaviors, talk, sometimes messages, if we know what to look for. And a person approaching them can prevent that suicide just by talking, just by listening. Some people have a longer suicidal crisis. Some suicidal crisis might go up and down, come in and out. I went to the NAMI dinner last night, and there was a woman who'd been at the state in the state hospital for a couple of years, and she talked about how Dr. Stephen Fritz, as a psychiatrist, had helped her overcome her suicidal thinking. And she said that she'd been suicidal, acutely suicidal, many times, and that she expected that she would have another suicidal crisis. But she knew what to do. She knows what to say to herself. She knows what kind of help to get. She's now entering graduate school after having been in the state hospital. So it's a very powerful story. So we know there's help, and it's up to us to give it. Just like Gally said, it's up to all of us. Gally said I'd give you some numbers, so I will. This is the part that puts people to sleep, so I didn't bring a lot. And I have access to a lot more numbers, so if you're interested in numbers, ask me. And I can just point you to in the right direction. There are over 700 suicides a year in Oregon for all ages. The rate's been increasing at all ages, or at most ages, since 2000. Among youth, it decreased from 1990 to 2010, and then we're seeing an increase again in youth from 2011 forward. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for persons between the ages of 15 and 34 in Oregon. The second leading cause of death. Behind, does anybody know? Motor vehicle crashes. It's the second leading cause of death. And it's not widely acknowledged, and it's very poorly funded. And thanks to Clackamas County for putting in a suicide prevention coordinator, because that's very, very exciting news. The Oregon rates have been higher than the national rates for decades. Clackamas County, I'm happy to say, the rates are slightly lower than the state. They're slightly lower than other counties in the state, not universally. There are other counties that have lower rates, but for the population that you have, Clackamas County rates are lower. There were 65 suicides among youth ages 10 to 24 in the 11 years of 2003 through 2013. Males are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than females in our state, and that's pretty true throughout the country. But women are 3 to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. Overall, 70% of people who died by suicide in Oregon had a diagnosed mental health disorder, alcohol and or substance use problem, or a depressed mood at the time of death. For youth from the ages of 10 to 24, that was 63% of youth had been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, alcohol or substance use problem, or a depressed mood. Less than 1/3 of those youth had received treatment. About one third of them, we know that they had disclosed their intent in some way or another. And I would imagine that if the people around them knew what it looked like to disclose intent, what it looked like to have suicidal thoughts, behaviors, that number would have been higher, that they would have been able better to recognize it. 10 to 17-year-olds comprise 2% of the suicides in Oregon, and 18 to 24-year-olds comprise 9% of the suicides in Oregon. Some of the factors behind a suicide, they're identified through our reporting systems at the time of death. One of the largest factors was a crisis within 2 weeks. And a crisis within 2 weeks, can be a crisis that's happened with previous 2 weeks or a crisis that's going to happen. For example, a court date or something, a crisis that a youth is really worried about and is having a hard time facing. These are for youth. These factors are for youth. Relationship problems, breakups, conflicts, friction, jealousy with a boyfriend, girlfriend, or for older kids with an intimate partner. Legal problems, that court date, or maybe an arrest. School problems, and school problems can include failing grades, bullying, social isolation. Also performance pressure. And performance pressure, I'm talking about those high achievers, the kids that seem to have it all, be really bright and be participating in all kinds of activities. Some of them might be at risk for suicide because they've put so much pressure on themselves, or they're getting outside pressure, either one or both, to perform, and they're worried that they won't live up to expectations and are not able to express their fears, express their emotional well-being, or express their problems to other people, their anxieties around that. So those are all potential school problems. For older youth, 18 to 24, it's jobs, financial problems are a factor identified. Relationships with others, like relationships with parents or friends, not a boyfriend, girlfriend. Um, 25% of suicides in Oregon are among veterans, and that's much higher than the rates among non-veterans. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the state's doing. I'm going to switch from the numbers. We've got a 5-year Garrett Lee Smith grant. We're just starting the second year. We get $736,000 per year for this grant, and most of that goes to 4 counties right now for the first 2 years. In the year 3, 4 more counties will join that grant. 7 counties have suicide prevention coordinators at this point. 5 years ago, I didn't go back and look, but 5 years ago there were very, very few. And the recognition of suicide is higher than it used to be, and that counties have suicide prevention coordinators is very, very exciting. What we're doing in the newest 5-year grant is system change. I think Amy's going to talk a little bit about what they're doing in Washington County, and we're helping to fund Washington County's efforts through the Garrett Lee Smith grant. The continuity of care, that someone who's facing a suicidal crisis and they go for help, that they're helped adequately by trained professionals, trained mental health professionals, trained primary care professionals, clinicians, but we're trained at every level, that they're met with people who know how to address them, how to treat them, how to talk to them, that we've got trained people at every level, that we've got an emergency department staff that not only is trained to deal with the suicide attempt to come in, but also how do they follow up. Maybe they follow up with a crisis response through Lions for Life or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or the county crisis response team, that they have a follow-up with a postcard, an email, a letter, or a phone call. We have evidence that those simple gestures make a difference between life and death for many people. That will reduce suicides among people at highest risk, those who've made attempts. So, and training around access to lethal means, that people in the emergency departments, in mental health, in primary care are trained to counsel family members and persons that are suicidal to at least temporarily remove access to firearms. Access to firearms is a very high, it's a very high risk for persons who are thinking about suicide. If they don't have that access, they might not in that moment be able to kill themselves, because nothing is as lethal or as quick as a firearm. Adoption of zero suicide, which is a concept that's taking hold nationally in healthcare systems and communities, that a community would devote itself to no suicides, rather than saying, well, we'll accept a rate of, we want to reduce our rate to whatever percentage of the population. Let's talk about zero suicides, and how do we get there, and how do we all work together to get to that rate, to get to zero. That, I think, is one of the most exciting things going on right now in suicide prevention and in the suicide world. Training, again, in QPR, in ASSIST, in and assessing and managing suicide risk, in mental health first aid, and other trainings are very, very important at every level. And in schools, comprehensive school education. We've promoted widely a program called Response, which is a comprehensive high school program. The first two elements I think that schools have to have, and this is backed up by evidence, it's not just my opinion, it's a best practice, is that schools have protocols and guidelines in place at the administrative level, and everybody in the school, all staff persons know what they are. And they have at least 2 ASSIST-trained people to go to. Those are the go-to people, and all staff know who those people are, so that any staff member can take a kid or a peer to that person and get help. And that ASSIST-trained person will know what to do from there. So beyond that, the comprehensive ASSIST program has a staff in service, a 2-hour staff in service, and then it's got 4 units for classroom with peer lessons in which students learn not to keep a secret. They learn to get help. And we also have 2 other programs that we've just initiated in the last year that are available to schools that have protocols, guidelines in place, and they have at least 2 ASSIST-trained people, and that's Cognito program. It's evidence-based, and one of the programs is evidence-based, and one of them is a best practice. Well, they're both best practices. They're interactive individual programs using avatars and motivational interviewing. So a staff person sits at his or her own computer and goes through the program and interacts with a student who's in psychological distress. They're wonderful programs. They've been promoted nationally, or they've been available nationally for a number of years, and it's the first time we've been able to bring them from Oregon. So if you're involved with the school, contact me and see how you can get free access to those programs. So I'm very excited about that. In middle schools, we need skill building, we need problem-solving skills, decision-making, conflict resolution, and at all levels, connectedness. Connectedness, including for elders, for every age, connectedness makes a difference. In elementary school, if we adopted the good behavior game in the first grade, we'd not only prevent suicidal attempts 18 years later, we have evidence with that. We have 20 years of research that shows that. We would also prevent tobacco use, drug use, criminal behaviors, social aggression among boys. We could prevent a whole host of risk behaviors in teenagers if we adopted the good behavior game in elementary school. Going lower than that, universal parenting skills, best practice parenting skills for everyone, not just for parents who are mandated to take them, but all of us need parenting skills, everybody. My poor children wouldn't have survived without them, probably. And I'm not talking about abuse and neglect here, but I couldn't have gotten through parenthood without the parenting classes that I took. Home nursing visits for prenatal care and postnatal care for new parents. Avoiding child maltreatment. If we'd prevent child maltreatment, we would prevent suicide. And that's my broad range of prevention, and you can see that it's going to take every single one of us, not only in our professional levels, but also our personal and our family levels. It will take all of us together to prevent suicide. There is hope, and it is preventable. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Wow, staggering statistics. The rate of youth suicide has been going up for many, many, many years. So what are we as a community going to do about that? Just food for thought. So thank you, Donna. And again, if you have questions for Donna, write them down on your note card, and we will get to that after Susie is our last guest panelist, and we'll open it up to the floor for questions and remarks and comments. So Amy Baker is going to talk with us today about a brand new concept here in Clackamas County. Some of you may have heard about it. Donna did a nice segue for Amy to talk about something called zero suicide. How many of you have heard of zero suicide? Just curious. Okay, so not too many of you, some of you. I'll let Amy introduce the concept of zero suicide, but this is the first time that Clackamas County has any formal conversation around this particular subject. We've never really talked about zero suicide in any formal way. This is the first time that our community is having this topic and this conversation. So she's going to introduce the idea of zero suicide to us. This is just the beginning of the conversation for us. We are in no way ready to adopt this mindset or this paradigm. This is just something that this is going to be one of many, 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 many conversations. So thank you for starting us off. Amy.
Good morning. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you, Gallie. And it is lovely to see so many people packed in a room. It's a good problem to have when you have to turn people away. So congratulations on that front. It's a good way to start. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the Zero Suicide Initiative and how we have begun to implement zero suicides in Washington County. And our journey with zero suicide in Washington County really started about 3 years ago when our community came together and decided to start a suicide prevention council. And we were having some conversations, forming that council and trying to decide what a reasonable target would be, right? We tend to average about 65 suicides a year in our county, and so we were having some conversation about what's a reasonable number. What should our target be? And one of our founding members of our council, a colleague of mine, Rich Roll, said, you know, I want to tell you all a story. He had recently been at a national conference, and he had heard some speakers talking about the Zero Suicide Initiative. And so this is the story that he told us. He said, I heard this speaker from the Henry Ford Health Foundation in Detroit. Anybody know about the Henry Ford Health Foundation? Okay, so I want you to picture Kaiser, right? So big behavioral and physical health system with lots of members. Anybody a Kaiser member in the room, right? Typically there are lots of Kaiser members, right? So I want you to sort of picture the Henry Ford Health Foundation in Detroit as like a big Kaiser entity, right? So the CEO of the Henry Ford Health Foundation is in a risk management conversation with a bunch of his managers, and they're talking about suicide among their membership. And he asked the room, what's a reasonable target that we should get down to when it comes to suicide in our membership? And a nurse in the back raises her hand. And he calls on her, and she says, why isn't it 0? And there's a little bit of silence. And he says, well, say more about that. And she says, well, when we talk about cancer, what do we aim for? Is there a certain number of deaths that is acceptable to us as a health system? When we think about other health conditions of our membership, is there a number that's acceptable of deaths? Are we planning for that? Smart CEO says, well, you got a point. What would it look like if we planned for 0? What would we have to do to get there? And that began a transformation in the Henry Ford Health Foundation that organization did, in fact, get to 0. And it's just one of many health systems and other organizations around the country that are implementing a whole raft of things to get their systems to zero. And it turns out that there's actually no research to support that suicide is inevitable. There's none. You won't be able to find it. Don't waste your time. But we have this perception in our communities that it's inevitable. People are just going to die by suicide despite our best prevention efforts. Turns out there's no research to support that. Instead, there's a growing body of research to support that we could, in fact, have no suicide in our communities. So this story was pretty compelling to our little group in Washington County. And so we decided to adopt as our vision, zero is possible. So that is our vision and our mission of our Suicide Prevention Council of Washington County. It's a lovely vision, and then we sort of scratched our heads and said, okay, now what do we do, right? So we took some time to educate ourselves not only about the National Suicide, Zero Suicide Initiative, but also the strategy. Anybody seen this? You can get one for free. It's really good reading. This is our 2012 National Strategy for Suicide Prevention. The good news about suicide prevention on a national and on a state level is that we have lots of really good evidence-based goals and objectives. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of information about zero suicide in this lovely document. So the council decided to form our goals and objectives in line with these national strategies. And then we needed to really zero in on zero suicide. What is it? So you have a little one-pager, I think, that was provided to you. And I would also encourage you to go to the Zero Suicide website for more details. But in essence, it's both a concept and a practice. So it's a set of tools and strategies, everything from training every single person in your system. So in the Henry Ford Health Foundation, they trained the person who called and reminded people about appointments. They trained the cafeteria folks. They trained the janitorial staff. In essence, they made suicide prevention everyone's business. Other strategies include engaging those folks with lived experience, doing a better job of engaging that population in suicide prevention, and also using data to drive quality improvement. So we started participating in these monthly calls that the national folks had, and we went to webinars, and we started sort of spreading this message on the council. And then we ran into some resistance. And I can see it in some of your faces, right? I want you to imagine for a moment that you have no suicide in Clackamas County. None. And a lot of your faces are sort of saying to me, that's a really nice idea, it's never going to happen. This is the same kind of resistance that we have run into in Washington County. And it comes from a place of people either having a belief system or being taught that some suicide is just inevitable, despite our best efforts. So one of the things that we had to take some time to do was talk about that and talk about the fact that there's no research to support that notion. In fact, there's this growing body of research going in the opposite direction, not just from health systems. Our own Air Force dramatically reduced their rates of suicide in the 1990s with some of the things that are a part of this initiative. I think the other part of this is really understanding and helping people cope with the concept that if suicide is really preventable, then maybe we are all responsible for preventing it. And if we're all responsible for preventing it, we're all responsible when it happens, right? And that's a really tough thing to kind of come to grips with. Because if we think it's inevitable, we can say, well, gosh, we did everything we could, but it's someone else's fault. Sorry, Donna. Sorry. You're interrupting my flow here. But if we say zero is really possible, that means we have a collective responsibility in prevention. But the good news about that is it works when we have a collective responsibility, right? That's how these systems have gotten there, is by making it everybody's business, right? It's not yours. It's not this person in an ivory tower that's responsible for suicide prevention. It's every single one of us. So we learned that we needed to communicate that message, and we also learned that we needed to make this message universal, that it's not just about health systems, which is where most of this research really lies. And so we invited David Covington, who's an internationally renowned zero suicide expert, to come to Washington County in May to talk to not only our health systems about what can be done, but also our educational systems and our law enforcement and parole and probation and our faith community and our business community. What are each of those systems doing to get to zero? What could they do? Are they even talking about suicide and how to prevent it? And so we were able to get our community better engaged in this mission, in this vision that this little council of folks had begun. We've also learned that we need to take advantage of opportunities before us, and one of them is the Garrett Lee Smith Youth Suicide Prevention Grant. We were able to get enough funding to hire a full-time suicide prevention coordinator, and we've housed that person in public health, and she is brand new. Her name is Megan Crane, and she's sitting way over there in the corner. She didn't know I was going to do this, by the way, but there she is. So we're really excited to have her to be able to take this vision forward with some action. So she'll be partnering with some of our area health systems and working with our council on all of those other systems. So I know that there's resistance to this idea in the room, and that's a good thing. I also want you to know that we're not alone, right? We're not even alone nationally. The National Health System in Great Britain has embraced the entire Zero Suicide Initiative. Imagine what our country would look like if we did that on a national level, what we might accomplish. And I would challenge you today. I love the card, but I'm gonna do an extra challenge. So my challenge to you is, if we are collectively responsible, what's the one thing that you can do today to get us to zero? Maybe it's just sitting and listening with an open mind today. Maybe it's, I don't believe anything this woman said, I'm going to that website, and I'm gonna look the research up myself. Maybe it's getting out your cell phone and putting in the crisis line. Maybe it's going to Get Trained to Help and getting training so you know how to identify someone who might be at risk in your personal life or your agency. Maybe it's going back to your agency, whatever that is, and saying, what are we doing? What could we be doing to get to zero? So I would challenge you to pick that one thing today. As you're sitting here or as you leave, there's all this technology stuff you could do too, right? You could post something on Facebook, you could take a selfie. So I just wanted to sort of start the conversation about that and encourage you to continue those conversations about zero suicide, and I look forward to hearing how that goes here in Clackamas County. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. We'll talk more about zero suicide and the initiative and kind of how that might look in our county. So thank you for introducing that to us and talking a bit about what Washington County has been up to. All right, Cody Welty. Just a brief kind of introduction to Cody. Not only is he one of our youth here in Clackamas County, and he's one of the many voices of our Clackamas County youth, and just happens to be the one that is up here in front of you today. There are many voices out there, and a lot of folks had talked to me about sharing their story today, and for lots of different reasons that couldn't happen. So there's plenty of opportunity for people to share their story in the future. We're just beginning to have these conversations. Cody is a sophomore at Western Oregon. He goes to college now. And I have to say, due to some good fortune and luck on my part, I was introduced to Cody over an email a while ago as someone who might be possibly interested in speaking at this event today. And I knew right away from the moment that Cody and I started bantering back and forth over text about our love of coffee that we were gonna work really nicely together. And then it progressed into arguing about who was going to buy the other one a cup of coffee, and he ended up winning. He bought his own coffee. So this time, there's going to be other conversations that we're going to have, Cody Welty, that I'm going to buy your coffee. So I want to say that, Cody, although I haven't known him for very long, is very near and dear to my heart. primarily for the reason that I believe that the voice of youth and the youth that are sitting in this audience, we don't get to hear your voice enough. Us adults, we walk around thinking that we know it all. And as one youth told me not that long ago, when I said, hey, what do the adults need to do to serve youth better? Like, what do we need to do to better support youth that are struggling with mental health issues and youth that are potentially at risk for suicide? And this particular youth basically told me to get my head out of my a blank blank. And he said, I hope I didn't offend you. And I said, well, no, you couldn't have been any more clear about what we need to do. So let that be a lesson to all of us in the room that are above the age of 24 and no longer considered youthful. Cody is one of the voices of Clackamas County Youth, and I can't tell you enough how pleased I am to have him here today, sharing his personal story about his own struggles. Thanks, Cody.
Thank you, Galli, so much for that great intro. Like Galli said, I'm 20 years old. I'm a sophomore at Western Oregon University. And I went to Sandy High School, a little north of here. And when I was 17, I was struggling with a lot of stuff. But I didn't quite fit the picture of what people think of when they think of someone who's struggling with depression. I was really active. I was involved. I was on our school leadership program. I was a 4-year letterman in 3 different sports. I had great grades. I was involved. I did a number of programs that we had at our school, and I just wasn't feeling very happy. I was so stressed out about everything that I was really dealing with, and it was a challenge. And I was taking a health class at the time. It was spring of my junior year. I was 17 years old. And we were talking about mental health, depression, anxiety, and suicide. And we're going through the textbook, and I'm looking at symptoms of depression. I was like, wow, I fit so many of these, but my life is so good. That's not me. Like, how do I fit in to this, what it's saying, what it's telling me, that I have loss of interest in activities, I'm not sleeping well, I feel sad all the time, and I have all these symptoms, but my life is good, so I shouldn't feel sad. And that was really frustrating for me to read about, that, wow, my life is great. I get good grades, I'm involved, I have a great family, and I still feel sad and depressed. And that almost made it worse to know that, there were people who had it so much worse than me who were doing well. And I struggled with this for a long time. And really over a period of 2 months, I just got worse and worse. I didn't want to wake up in the morning. Every day I went to practice I dreaded it. It's like, great, when can I go to bed next? And I just wanted to sleep forever. And after about a 2-month period of really feeling like this, I decided I didn't know where else to go. I didn't see myself getting any better. I didn't see myself making any progress. And I didn't know how to talk about how I was feeling. I thought, I'm a guy, and as a man, I'm not allowed to talk about my feelings and my emotions. I'm supposed to be an emotional rock and not really feel upset. And, towards the end of that 2 months, on May 1st of my junior year in high school, I attempted suicide. And I was saved, obviously, because I'm standing here, but there was a man who came by and ended up saving my life, and I've never felt lower than that moment right there. I felt that I was such a failure in my life that I couldn't even kill myself correctly. That I'd screwed up that, and I thought it was one of the simplest things to do. But I'm very lucky and happy that I was saved, and that I'm able to make progress now. And it took a long time, and it was a lot of work. But I spent, I think, about a week to 2 weeks in the psychiatric ward of the hospital. And while I was in there, I learned a lot. I learned how many people there are who struggle with what I struggled with. I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one who felt like this. And knowing the stats, like you all do now, I wasn't. There were so many people, but we couldn't talk about it. We didn't know how. And I learned in the hospital how to deal with a lot of the stress that I was going through. I learned how to handle my emotions in a positive way instead of trying to bury everything that I felt. It's okay to feel sad and upset, and it is okay to talk about that and to get help with a lot of stuff that's going on in your life. And it's such a challenge, but it was so important for me. I took about a year of counseling and a year of antidepressants to really to get myself kind of back on track. One thing I noticed, I went back to school about 2 months later, just because I wanted to. I felt like it was necessary for me to kind of show up, and I realized that youth are much better at handling people who are struggling with this than adults are. What I noticed was a lot of adults try to be there for someone they don't know, which is great, and it was much appreciated. But for me, I had people that I was talking to. I had a counselor, I had my family, and I had my core group that I really needed to talk about, that I needed to talk to. So everyone else who was asking me, hey, how are you? Like, it's good to see you again. How is the hospital? I hope you're doing okay. And I was bombarded with questions by adults, it was hard to answer. And it was really emotional all the time and very difficult in that way. But a lot of youth, when I was talking to them, they were like, hey, good to see you. Glad you're back. Did you get the assignment from last night? Have you finished your homework? And that was great. I was like, thank you for really being there and not making me feel like I'm a freak or abnormal for feeling this way. And I think one of the most important things to know about youth who are struggling is a lot of us don't know how to talk. And a lot of us are embarrassed to say how we feel and embarrassed to say that we're feeling sad. And I think a lot of adults struggle with that too. But for us, and for me, I didn't want to trouble anyone else with my emotions and how I was feeling. I didn't want anyone else to feel sad because I felt sad. So I decided, well, I might as well bear all of it. And it didn't work out so well. Really, some of the big things that helped me was knowing I wasn't the only person who struggled with this, and knowing that people were here for me if I needed them. And that was, I think, the best way for people to communicate. Hey, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're back. I'm here for you if you need it. And really, when you're dealing with it post, I felt that was the best way for me. And it might not be the same for everyone else. I can't speak for every other person who struggles with this, but I know for me it was helpful to not go too deep emotionally after you know someone is struggling with this. A couple things that weren't really helpful for me. I got told a lot. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, you'll be okay. I know you're struggling now, but that doesn't help. For me, it's like, well, yeah, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but I feel like I'm in a fog and I can't see 2 feet in front of my face. So there's no light for me. It's just dark. So that was really challenging to hear, like, okay, yeah, there's a light, but what do I do now? I'm stuck in this tunnel, I'm stuck in this fog, and I don't know where to go. I got a lot of, you have a lot of stuff to look forward to and things like that. Like, yes, I know I have a great family, my life was great, but that's not what I was struggling with. I was struggling with pressure and stress. So yeah, I had a lot to live for, but I didn't know how to handle anything that I was really dealing with. There's a lot of youth out here in the audience that I can see. There's a really broad age range. It's pretty amazing, honestly. For people who are struggling with depression right now and don't know how to talk about it, or struggling with any anxiety or things that can really cause you a lot of stress in your life, you're not abnormal. You're not a freak. You know, what you have is just as fixable as a broken leg. It's just in your head. It's really easy to go get your leg splinted if you break it when you're falling down. But when a lot of people think about depression, they're like, "Oh, what are you going to do? I don't know. Just feel happy." Like, no, there's a lot of much better options than just feeling happy. And you all, based on the hand raising earlier, I can tell you're all pretty experienced with this and really know what to look for. And just feeling happy doesn't work. That's what counselors are for. And For those of you who are professionals and counselors and help youth like this, what's hard for a lot of youth is knowing what counseling really is. I know for me, I thought it was still back in like the Freudian psychology, where I was going to sit on my couch, talk about my early childhood, and somehow learn that I wanted to sleep with my mother. Like, thanks, Freud, for all of that psychological help. You were great. Thank you. I go on Tuesdays at one of the bar downtown. That's not actually true. I'm not 21. I can't do that. But it was important for me to know that counseling wasn't like that. We didn't do the inkblot test. It was more, hey, tell me about what you're struggling with. Okay, that's interesting. Here, this is what you can do to help yourself with those stressful situations, and I'm going to help you work through those. And that was amazing. Counseling was so helpful for me. If I had government funding, which I don't, but I feel like young people should be just as required to go see a youth counselor when they're younger as getting a checkup at the doctor's office. Because it's so important, because kids don't think to talk about mental health. They think, Mom, my knee hurts, I got a scratch, okay, let's go to the doctor, get you a checkup. That doesn't happen for your brain, unfortunately, and it's something that really should. For everyone else who really knows someone who's struggling or knows someone who could be struggling, help that person pinpoint what it is in their life that's really causing that problem. Help them figure it out. And because as soon as you really figure out what the stressor is and what's causing you this type of emotional trauma, you can start to fix it. And you can start to realize, why is this so hard for me, and what should I do about it? And we need help with that. I'm terrible at asking for help. I've gotten much better at it, but I still suck. It's hard. And really, that's some of the most important things, is asking for help. And if you can't do it face-to-face, write it down. That was something really important for me, because I didn't want to burden anyone with what I was saying. And it's hard to talk about. No one wants to talk about mental health. But writing it down is a much easier way to do this. And just like the note cards today with the questions, it's hard to ask, and that's a much safer way to really do it without kind of putting your face on it. Recovery is hard, but for those of us who are struggling, life is the most important and the most difficult thing that we'll ever do. And it's worth it.
Cody Welty, your story is, I'm a bit speechless. Very heartfelt story. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. What I heard from you in your story is, we as adults have to create space to listen. We just have to listen. We just have to show up. We have to listen. Thank you, Cody. Last but not least, Susie Shank is going to be talking to us today about some practical information. So we filled your head with lots of things up until now. You know, you've got the data from Donna, you've got the hardcore facts, the objective numbers, the daunting numbers of suicide and how suicide is getting bigger in our state year by year for youth. Amy introduced the idea of a new concept, trying to get our heads around that as a community. What do we want to do? Do we want to do anything? How do we do it? Cody's lived experience of his struggles and his honest vulnerability of sharing what it's like to be in that place back then and currently in his recovery. Susie's going to bring it all together for us to offer us some practical information about what you can do. You might be sitting up there thinking, okay, I just got all this information. Now, what the heck do I do with all this information? How am I going to make a difference? No pressure. Susie is going to talk to us a little bit about what you can do. And it doesn't matter if you're a counselor, if you're an administrator, if you're a director. if you're a student, all the other folks that are in this room, all of us play a role in this work. And that's what Susie's going to talk about today. Thanks, Suze.
Thank you, Callie. So you said earlier that I have trained hundreds. I'm actually counting in the thousands now. Thank you. But there were a lot of hands that weren't raised in this room earlier. And so mental health first aid is an extremely important class that is available to all of you. And I do recognize a few faces in the crowd. Hello, good to see you. But if you haven't taken the class, I do want to urge you to stop by the Get Trained to Help table out there and make sure you look at the upcoming trainings and see when you can make one work. So I'm here wearing a couple different hats. I am a trainer, and I'm also a crisis counselor in Clackamas County. We've talked a lot about collaboration and that this is on all of us to affect some change in our community, and I couldn't agree more. My goal is to ask all of you to help me work myself out of a job. Help me get this community to a point where we're not at crisis points. How do we move toward recognizing things sooner so that people get help sooner, so that it's okay to have the conversation, to ask for the help sooner so that it's not a crisis point? I can tell you that if it does reach crisis, you've got an amazing team of people waiting to help you, either on the phone or in person when you walk in without an appointment. We're ready for that. But there are so many ways that we as a community can prevent things from getting to the point of crisis. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. So with everything you've heard so far, I'm going to actually put it back on all of you. Let's really talk about what are some of the signs and symptoms. So specifically with youth, I'm going to ask you to shout it out. What's a sign that somebody might be struggling with thoughts of suicide? Giving away possessions, things that are really valuable or meaningful. Going to somebody and saying, you know, you've been really close to me and I want you to have this. Absolutely, thank you. What else? Saying you're tired all the time, yes. Or just fine. Absolutely. Isolation. How do we notice isolation? Yeah, stop going to school, stop participating. We have to notice the absence. So that's sometimes a little more challenging. What else? Loss of interest in activities that used to make somebody's heart sing or motivate them. Absolutely. Irritability, thank you. A lot of times with depression, we think about sadness. But for a lot of us, it is more of an irritability. We're kind of on edge. One question sends us over. We snap back pretty quickly.
Saying goodbye to people in your life.
Saying goodbyes. And that can look a lot of different ways. But we need to listen. We need to listen for that.
Sometimes it's just a change in behavior, whether it be eating, sleeping, social habits, something along those lines that someone who knows and loves them would notice.
Absolutely. Change in behavior.
Inability to sleep.
Not sleeping or sleeping all the time. Acting out. So taking chances, doing things, things that are more risky than maybe would be normal.
Just a change in general.
A change.
From their regular baseline.
Right. And as we all know, youth don't go through any changes, so we're going to notice that, right? But we really do want to pay attention. Because it is such a developmental time, it's really easy to say, oh, that's normal. But has anybody seen Spider-Man?
Am I it?
Wow. Well, this is going to bomb. So he has a spidey sense. He has a notion. We all have that. We have a gut feeling that something was off about that. We want to pay attention to that because when we notice change and it triggers our spidey sense, there might be more to it. And what's the harm? What's the harm in asking? I'd rather err on the side of caution. What about a complete change? So somebody's been struggling and suddenly things are amazing. Is that concerning? Absolutely. What we know is that if someone has made a decision to end their life, it can be a relief. And so we can see a drastic shift in mood and presentation. So we want to pay attention to that. As loved ones, as family members, we want to believe that somebody's feeling so much better. We want that to be the truth, but it's worth checking into. So thank you for that. Now that we've got our signs and symptoms, what do we do with that? Ask the question. Absolutely. We have to ask the question. We have to ask directly if someone is feeling suicidal. We have to ask, are you having thoughts of ending your life? Have you thought about killing yourself? We have to use those specific words. We have to have the courage to say those things. Now, no one has asked for this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. I'm going to give you my phone number. So if you could all pull out your phone. Go ahead and start the process of putting in a phone number.
Do you want us just to call you right now?
All right. 503-655-8585. 503-655-8585. Does anybody know what phone number that is? Yay. The Clackamas County Crisis Line. Someone will answer that. A clinician will answer that phone 24 hours a day. They are ready to help you. If you gather these signs, if you have these concerns, your spidey senses are going off, and you feel like, I can't ask this question, I want you to call us. I want you to call us immediately. Talk it through. We will ask the question if you don't feel like you can. But if you do ask the question, if you get to the point where you have the courage, you feel like you can ask the question. And first of all, how do we build courage on that? We know what to do if we get a yes. So again, always by default, you have the crisis team. If you get a yes, if you are concerned about where to go further, call the crisis number. We are there to support you. We will step in. We will do all that we can to help you in that moment. The ding kind of made my thoughts go off. That's what I'm going to blame it on anyway. So when we ask the question, we need to appear confident. As human beings, we will take the out if we are given it. So if I ask, are you thinking about suicide? What am I telling you to tell me? No, please do not say yes. I need to ask with confidence. I need to be able to ask the question directly. So I believe so much in mental health first aid that I made sure that my mother went through the course. And there was a section of role play. And I was a person role playing being suicidal in a moment. In the role play situation, my mother could not get the words out of her mouth to ask me if I was having thoughts of suicide. This is a difficult question to ask. If you haven't done it before, if you're not used to it, I urge you to practice. Go home, say it in the mirror. Say it in the car on your way home. But I want you to realize that it's a difficult question to ask, especially if it's somebody that you care about, if it's somebody you love, somebody who's close to us. But it's so important that we ask the question. So very important. One of the things that comes up in the classes is, well, what if I ask the question and the person wasn't thinking it? Am I going to make them now start thinking about suicide? Is that true? No, it's not. We're not going to put the idea in somebody's head by asking the question. We're not. The truth is that it's a very common thought. It's a thought that comes in and can go. But for some of us, it sticks around. And then just like any other thing that we bury or keep as a secret, it gets bigger. It takes up more space. It starts to be more of a burden. So we need to make it okay to have this conversation, to make it a safe space to talk about. When we're talking about the youth in our community, does anybody know the biggest protective factor that we can provide to our youth? Confidentiality is fantastic. It gives us the safety to have the conversation. But what we need as youth is one supportive adult. The connection to one supportive adult who we feel we can go to, who provides us with the confidentiality, who makes us feel safe, who makes it okay to talk about things, ideas, what we're feeling. So think about that. If there are youth in your life, make sure that they have at least one person that they're connected to, that they can go to. And a lot of you in the room may be that one person, whether you're the parent or not. We can't rely on the natural support system sometimes. Sometimes it is us as the community members. The last piece that I want to talk about is specifically when we're talking about youth, we need to remember that timing is different. Timing is now. There isn't the lifelong experience of things will change. There will be a different thing that comes along tomorrow. Everything that happens right now is life or death. It bumps up the severity level, so a breakup, advising that there are other fish in the sea isn't helpful. Advising that, you know what, you're going to get over this, you're going to be fine, you're going to realize that that relationship wasn't great, not helpful in this moment. It is a very severe trauma sometimes to individuals, and we need to hear the situation for what it is for them, not how we as adults think of it or categorize it. We need to listen and be open to what they are experiencing. Again, please have the courage to first of all start watching and collecting these signs and symptoms. Pay attention to your spidey senses. If something feels a little off, pay attention to that. Ask the question. Ask the question directly and with confidence in a way that you can hear the answer. And call us. Call the crisis line at any point when you need support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susie Shank. Wow, so what's the crisis line number, since everybody has it in their phones? Okay, and when can you use that? Anytime, right? Holidays, weekends, middle of the night. You will get a live person who can help you. And like Susie said, the burden of that call lies on the crisis worker. So we actually have our many crisis workers in the audience. I know that to be a fact. So thank you to folks from Lines for Life who are also here, who are also folks who pick up some of our Clackamas County calls after hours. So can we have a big round of applause for these folks up here?